recently there was an episode that addressed the issue of resting bitch face, RBF. And I said that I felt like RBF was bullshit. You know, the more I think about it, it makes sense. Some of us, just as your face falls, just resting bitch face. So a lot of the comments seem to be directed at that this was a bad thing. But one particular person stood out against popular opinion and pointed out that there are definite benefits to resting bitch face, and we want to point those out to you.
Now, I'm going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create content for us to edit, and we're going to create the, another chapter of Ghost of a Chance. So this is how I would go about it. So now I've got content. My content is going to be, I'm going to clean the bathroom, and I'm not worried about audio. I don't care what anybody says because it's going to all be stripped out, no audio. So, and if I decide that it's really long and I want a time lapse, I can do that, but I'm just going to run around and clean. And I'm carrying the camera with me, so we're vlogging cleaning. Don't settle in too much, honey, because I'm going downstairs. You're probably going to follow me. So far, I emptied the garbage cans into a grocery bag, and I'm heading down for paper towels because we're out. Threw in a little laundry. Okay, I'm going to stop talking because this is going to get erased.
Chapter 8. Tyler drove about 2 minutes down the road and took a left turn, which brought him right to a small market called O'Malley's Market. How quintessentially Irish, he thought to himself. He parked the car and headed into the small grocery. He was first struck by the brightness of the place, almost taken aback by the sheer amount of food and supplies that could be bought in this one little store. He grabbed a cart and headed straight to the cleaning supplies aisle, took out his list, and began to load one thing after another into it. Tyler looked around, confused, and began to rummage through some of the smaller cleaning products, looking for the gloves his mother told him about. Scratching his head, he went in search of a clerk to help him find what he was looking for. "Excuse me," he said politely to the lady behind the counter. "Aye," she answered back. "My mom gave me a list of cleaning supplies that I'd need to clean up the cottage I'm staying at for the month, and I can't seem to find these gloves anywhere." Tyler showed her the list. "Honestly, I don't even know what half these things are. Do you?" "That's because they're over in farming supplies. We keep some things in stock here so that the herders don't have to keep running over to Cork to get what they buy the most often," she explained. Tyler looked completely lost, asked, "What do they use them for?" "Are you a sheep herder?" "No, I'm a writer." "Then, trust me, it's best that you don't know." "Okay, thanks. I'll take your word for it." She handed him a pack of the heat-proof gloves and looked in his cart. "You sure do have a lot of cleaning supplies in there. I'm staying at the Chance Cottage on Tower Hill Road for the month, and the inside looks like it hasn't been disturbed in over a century. There's enough dust in that place to make bricks with." "The Chance place, you say?" "Yep, the outside looks like it's been tended to every day, but the inside looks like a mausoleum." "It probably is." She looked like she wanted to tell him something, changed her mind, and then changed it back. "You know, they say that place is haunted." "I don't believe in ghosts. I spent the last decade writing ghost stories and staying in what was reputed as the most haunted places on Earth, and never had so much as an unexplained creak or rustle happen. Although, to be honest, if something like that did happen, I'd probably hightail it out of the country." She giggled. "Well, good luck to you, then. Is there anything else you need that I can help you with?" A coffee pot, please. The biggest one that you have. I turn coffee into books. You won't find any fancy coffee here, but we do have it, and I'll take you to the coffee machines. Thanks, Tyler said, and followed her like she was his second grade teacher and she was bringing the whole class to the library. When they got to the small collection of coffee pots, she pointed them out to him. Thank you, he said. I really do kind of feel like I'm out of my league with all this home good shopping and stuff. My apartment back home is still decorated in the I just graduated from college look. She smiled and said, if you have any trouble over there at the Chance place, let me know. Some of my people work with that sort of stuff. I will. Thank you again. Oh, and I'm Hannah, by the way. It's nice to meet you. Tyler pointed to himself. Tyler. Welcome to the Emerald Isle, Tyler. She turned and walked away. Tyler spent the next half hour buying everything he needed. He didn't know if the icebox worked, so he ended up buying one of those coolers used for camping and a couple of bags of ice. In addition to getting the food he would need for the next day or so, he also got a new pillow and pillowcase, just in case. Tyler packed up the car and headed home. With so much going on in his head at the moment, Tyler was struggling to pay attention to his driving. It was a good thing that he lived so close to the market, because he kept having to remind himself which side of the road to drive on. He took no time unpacking the car and getting the food into the cooler. He was so glad he had bought a sandwich, potato chips, and a Coke, because he was starving. When Tyler went into the cottage to reopen all the windows, a sheet that had been covering one of the chairs was sitting on the floor. He picked it up and brought it outside to shake the dust off of it. Tyler's face scrunched up and he looked at the sheet that he had roughly folded. I don't remember taking this off that chair, he said out loud. He shook his head and put the sheet on the porch and headed back into the house. The scent of flowers wafted through the room, giving him an eerie feeling. Rubbing his arms to stave off the goosebumps that were forming on his arms, he looked around the cottage. It was the same, but somehow it felt different than it had when he left for the market. He took the sheets off all the furniture and took his new shiny hand vacuum to the sofa and chairs. He decided to call it break time and took his lunch outside to eat on the porch. After practically inhaling his sandwich, he settled back and slowly drank his Coke, appreciating the soft breezes that were blowing his way. He leaned back onto the porch railing and pulled out his phone to check his email and noticed that he'd gotten a text from Ben. He opened up the app and read, "How's Ireland?" "Dusty," he texted back. "How are you feeling?" "Annoyed that everyone keeps asking me how I'm feeling." "Then I won't ask," Ben texted back in all caps. "Sorry, I'm fine. Stop texting. I'll call you." It took a few seconds for Ben to answer the phone, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Any cute Irish lasses?" The extended silence became uncomfortable, and with a sheepish laugh, Ben said, "Too soon?" Tyler chuckled. "Yeah, 2 days, maybe just a little bit." "Sorry, man," Ben said with sympathy. "It's okay, but no, I'm not looking. I'm just cleaning up this disaster of a cottage and then getting this book finished so that I can come home and have half my brain removed. Ty, chances are the surgery won't affect your ability to write. They're just removing the tumor. It will stop the headaches and other issues that you're having." "I know, and you're probably right, but I'm not willing to take that chance until I get this book done. Then I'll take that chance. Hopefully the only thing they'll remove is my tumor." "And your personality," Ben deadpanned. "Har har, you're a funny asshole, you know that?" Ben laughed. "I know. So when do you want me to come out? I have ops later this week, but I'm sure I can pop in next week." "Pop in? From the U.S. to Ireland? That's quite the commute." "Well, it's not every day you get to visit your brother in Ireland. I'm thinking pubs, maybe a beer wench or two." "You're an ass, dude. They don't have beer wenches here. That's a medieval thing." "I'm not coming if there aren't any beer wenches." Tyler laughed. "Next week will be great. I should go now, though, since I have to finish cleaning up this mess." "Is it that bad?" "Ben, you have no idea. It looks like the Addams family's vacation home." "Then I better let you go. I'll call you in a few days." Don't get your ass shot off. You know, it's your best feature. Yeah, 'cause it looks like your face. Later, bro. Ben hung up. Tyler laughed, grabbed the trash from his lunch, and headed to the house. He grabbed a garbage bag and started to fill it up with the sheets that covered the furniture. This is looking much better, he said to himself. There was a slight breeze and the heavy scent of lavender and honeysuckle. Tyler turned and looked out the window. There was no breeze coming from that direction. The hair on the back of his neck stood up on end, and his skin prickled with goosebumps. He shook it off and went back to work. He dragged the bag out to the car and put it in the trunk. He would bring the sheets down to the laundromat the next day and get them cleaned. He looked up to the cottage, and for a split second he thought he saw a woman standing in the window. He blinked, and the image disappeared. It was just the light playing off the window, right? He asked, not sure who he was trying to convince. Tyler spent the next 2 hours cleaning the bathroom and the kitchen. He was getting tired and decided to take a short nap on the sofa. He pulled out his new pillow and case and set up the sofa with the throw blanket, took an over-the-counter pain pill, shut the windows, and lay down on the sofa. It didn't take long for him to fall asleep. Chapter 9. Tyler opened his eyes and looked around. The cottage was the same, but different. The fireplace was there, but the mantel was made of stone slabs. It didn't have the plaster surround that he dusted earlier. The furniture was rough but comfortable. There were wool rugs on the floor. He looked into the kitchen. There was no fridge or stove, and the countertop was gone as well. Confused, Tyler looked outside. It was dark out. When he went down for a nap, it was only 3 in the afternoon. It's possible he slept that long, but how did everything change? The stove was no longer there, but there was a fireplace with a big black pot hanging from a hook inside of it. The coffee maker. Where was the coffee maker? Tyler spent some time looking for it, but it was nowhere to be found. He couldn't find a light switch or a lamp at all. The only thing to light the dark cottage was a few candlesticks with candles in them. There was an oil lamp on the kitchen table, but it was out of oil. Tyler continued to look around, wondering if he'd been robbed while he was asleep. He walked back toward the bathroom. It wasn't there. He looked into the bedroom. No one was in there, but the bedroom looked nothing like the bedroom he was in earlier. It was just an open room with 2 beds. One looked like a queen-size bed, and the other was a smaller version of the first. He walked back toward the front of the cottage and smelled the peat burning in the stove. The scent was woodsy and earthy at the same time. He kind of liked it. Tyler went back and sat on the couch. A small wooden toy boat caught his attention, and he bent down to pick it up. He could see the marks from the knife used to carve it. He was wondering where this had come from when he heard a loud shrill. Tyler sat upright. What the hell? He looked around the cottage. Everything was back to normal, and his phone was ringing. Tyler reached over, grabbed the cell phone from the coffee table, and swiped the answer icon. "Hello?" he asked, since he hadn't bothered to check who was calling. "Tyler, are you okay?" his mom asked, noticing the quiver in her son's voice. "Oh, Mom, hi. Yeah, I'm fine. I just woke up from the weirdest dream." "Tell me about it," she said, trying to hide the concern in her voice. The doctor had told her that people with brain tumors can exhibit personality changes, hallucinations, both auditory and visual, as well as a dozen other symptoms to look out for. Since he hadn't had any of those things except for the headaches at home, this change concerned her. "I dreamed that I was sleeping and then woke up, and the cottage didn't look like it looks now. It was like being in the cottage over 100 years ago. There was no electricity, no appliances. There wasn't even a bathroom. It was weird. Peat was being burned in the fireplace, and it smelled really good. There wasn't a bedroom either, just a small room with 2 beds in it. And, Mom, there was a wooden toy boat. I was looking at it when I woke up." "So you dreamed of the cottage from a bygone era?" Basically, yeah, Tyler chuckled. After a not-so-dramatic pause, his mother said, "The reason I'm calling is because I got in touch with the cleaning people and found out why they haven't been out to the cottage to make sure it was ready for you. And you're gonna laugh because you're a city dweller, but there was an emergency with one of the sheep and all hands were on deck," Colleen told him. "Go on," Tyler said encouragingly. "One of the sheep gave birth to twins, and their little legs were basically around each other, so they needed everyone's help to right the baby lambs so that they could be born. Isn't that marvelous?" "Actually, it is kind of cool, Mom, and now I know what those gloves are used for." "Yes, my son, you do. At any rate, I have them coming out on Friday to make sure the place is spotless and to change the linens and all that good stuff. Mom, it's Tuesday. Make do with what you have now. I also ordered a new mattress for you and new bedding. Those will be there Thursday. I hope you like buffalo plaid." "What? No Ninja Turtles? Mom, you failed me," Tyler teased. "Don't get cheeky. So that's that. If I think of anything else, I'll call you. No more weird dreams. You need your rest." "Mom," Tyler hesitated. "What, angel baby?" "Have you heard from Amy?" "No, darling, I'm sorry. Do you want me to call her or her parents?" "Nah, I just wondered." "I know, it hurts, sweetheart, and it's gonna hurt for a while. Just push that aside and get what you need to get done so we can have you back home where you belong, so we can take care of you." "All right, Mom, I love you." "I love you too. Get some rest." "I will, I promise." When Tyler got off the phone with his mother, he got up from the sofa and padded to the kitchen. The sun was still shining through the windows, but was a bit lower in the sky. He plugged in the coffee pot, half expecting a fuse to blow for the electrical wires to crackle into flame, but he was willing to risk it for a good cup of coffee. He would risk the whole cottage. He chuckled to himself and shook his head. He turned around to grab the tin of pre-ground coffee and poured some into the filter. He went to turn on the water faucet. He was stopped momentarily by the strong scent of lavender and honeysuckle. That was weird, he thought. There wasn't a breeze to be found. It was almost like a big rainstorm was brewing and the air was eerily still. Where was this scent coming from, he wondered. He opened the tin of coffee and took a big sniff of it. He sighed with pleasure at the rich, earthy scent. It definitely wasn't flowers. Tyler reached for the faucet again, but something made him stop. He turned the light on over the sink. It was dim because he hadn't been up there to dust the bulbs, so he went to his luggage to grab the flashlight that he always had with him. It didn't do anyone any good to be walking around an old house without a flashlight. He turned it on and looked at the faucet closely. It was then that he noticed the jagged edge to the metal. It was as if someone had tried to pry the faucet off and bent the metal up into a sharp edge. This was Ireland. They didn't have the same problem with vandals stealing fixtures and pipes from empty houses. I wonder what caused this. Probably some renter trying to repair it, maybe. He would have mangled his hand if he'd grabbed it. He shook his head and went to grab something to bend the metal back down so that he could use the faucet safely. He let the water flow until it ran clear, and filled up his new coffee maker and clicked the start button. While the coffee brewed, he cleared off the kitchen table. He rinsed out his new coffee mug and didn't bother to dry it properly before pouring the steaming liquid into it. He took a sip and sighed deeply. After he had splashed a bit of cream into it, he placed it on the table and went to get his laptop and writing supplies. Once he'd had his office set up, he began opening files on his laptop. He was set to write. He had his laptop, notebook, pens, pencils, and highlighters. He'd even had the forethought to bring his lucky mug from Emerson to use as a pen holder. Tyler clicked the folder on the desktop of his computer that was labeled Glencoe Book 4 and opened up the Word doc with the last chapter he had written. He read over the last chapter he had written while slowly sipping his still-hot coffee. He felt a breeze ruffle the hair around his ears and smelled the sweet fragrance of honeysuckle again. He looked outside and noticed that, while the sky was darkening with storm clouds, there still wasn't so much as a swaying of a leaf or quiver of a stamen. The calm before the storm, he thought to himself. Tyler stuck his head out the window to see if he could smell flowers. He could, but not with any of the intensity of the scent he smelled just a few minutes earlier. He turned back to the computer, and a flash of lightning showed through the window. Then a clap of thunder boomed, and within seconds the skies opened up and the rain came down in torrents. Tyler jumped up and closed the window before the rain could come in and get his papers wet. He then went through the cottage and closed all the other windows. When he got to the bedroom, he again smelled lavender and honeysuckle. Lightning flashed, and for a brief second he saw the outline of a woman in the cheval floor mirror in the bathroom. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. There was nothing. He turned on the bathroom light and inspected the mirror. Again, there was nothing. He knew he was exhausted, but he didn't feel that tired. He shook his head, chalking up the vision to his imagination as well as the subject matter he wrote. Tyler went back into the kitchen and looked at the time. It was just past 5 o'clock. He wondered how it had gotten so late so fast. He must have taken a longer nap than he'd realized. He sat down and took a long draw off his now lukewarm coffee and set it down on the counter. He grabbed his dinner out of the cooler and ripped the cover off the salad he'd gotten, dumped the dressing and croutons on top, and took out a plastic fork. He grabbed a soda and refilled his coffee cup. He worked right through dinner, eating as he went. Having finished the 2 chapters and jotting down the setup for the next 2, Tyler decided to call it a night. He had the beginning of a headache and really needed to just relax, maybe read or watch something on his iPad. He wanted a shower but wasn't quite ready to take that on at the moment, so he quickly changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, grabbed a blanket, and went back to the sofa. He stretched out and decided he wanted to watch a movie. He chose a light-hearted romantic comedy, a chick flick, as his brother would have called it, and within the first 5 minutes he was reminded of Amy. Amy, the beautiful girl with the big blue eyes and brown hair. His Amy, who looked like she would be dancing naked in the forest at midnight instead of running a publishing house. He was supposed to be on his honeymoon, but here he was, in a still, dusty cottage in the middle of a field in Ireland. About this time, they would have been having dinner in Prague. He would have taken her to the Stave Library, a magnificent and stunning building that she always wanted to see. They would probably end the day with wine on the terrace of their hotel, making love and sleeping in each other's arms. Tyler sighed as a wave of pain washed over him. His chest hurt and his heart felt bruised and broken. Still in denial of what had happened, the pain creeping up on him slowly, Tyler was at a loss as to how to handle this level of despair. He got up from the sofa and went into his bag, pulling out a small bottle of whiskey he had bought at the duty-free store at the airport. After cracking open the top and taking a swig, he put it down on the coffee table and sat back down. Laptop in hand, he checked Amy's Facebook page. There hadn't been a post from her since the night before the wedding. He scrolled through her pictures. Pictures of them, of him, of the places they had been together. Memory after memory tore at his heart like the hooks a soul would hang from in hell. He said her name out loud and cleared his throat. How could they have gone from pre-wedding bliss to not being in each other's lives at all? It hurt. It hurt badly. He took another swig of whiskey and, with his elbows on his knees, held his face in his hands and caught a cry in his throat. He lifted the laptop from the cushion beside him and put it on the coffee table. He left the screen open to a photo of Amy laughing. Grabbing the blanket, he wrapped himself and lay down in a fetal position and just stared at Amy's face. He lay there, silently crying, tears streaming down his cheeks. As he lay there, sobbing his heart out, he felt a warmth envelop him. He blinked and sniffed. Despite his stuffed-up nose, he could detect that scent of lavender and honeysuckle. He blinked again and sat up. Confused with what had just happened, he looked around the room. There was nothing out of the ordinary there. He checked the label on the bottle of whiskey. Maybe there were extra ingredients in there, but there was nothing strange listed. There was no explanation as to why he suddenly felt strangely calm and at peace. He grabbed the bottle of whiskey and put the top on and walked it to the kitchen where he put it in the cabinet. Tyler poured a cup of coffee and went back to the sofa. He decided that he wasn't ready to watch any romantic comedies and switched to an action film from Belarus. The subtitles would keep him engaged long enough to relax and get sleepy. He fell asleep within 10 minutes of the movie starting. Chapter 10. Tyler found himself outside the cottage. From where the sun hung in the sky, he could tell that it was mid-morning. He saw a woman walking around his yard. She was dressed in a butter-yellow linen dress covered with a gray knit shawl. Her hair was a burnt orange-red, hanging in straight waves over her shoulders. He wanted to walk closer to her, but didn't want to frighten her. She looked up and right at him, but appeared to be seeing right through him. She was achingly beautiful, with the saddest blue eyes that Tyler had ever seen. He waved at her, but even though she was staring straight at him, she didn't see him. Tyler tried to tear his eyes away from her, but her bright blue eyes and pink lips kept drawing his eyes. She was so pale, like a princess who'd been locked in a tower for her whole life. Her skin was so white it was almost iridescent. Tyler stood on the side of the yard and watched as two small children, a little boy and a girl about 7 years old, ran up to the woman. She knelt down and talked to them. It looked like she was giving them directions. The little tow-headed boy ran off with a rebel yell, the woman and the girl shaking their heads in unison, looking after him. The girl was the spitting image of her mother, the only difference being that the child had a slight tan and freckles spattered across her nose. Tyler realized that if he stood just so, he could almost hear them. He moved barely an inch closer and heard the woman yell at the boy, "Thomas, be careful and don't run off." "You shouldn't have told him that this was a treasure hunt, Mama," the girl said. "He's only 5. He needs to think this is a game of finding fortune and not a search for edible food," the woman admonished the girl. The girl looked up at the woman, her eyes filled with tears and her little lips quivering. Regret crossed the woman's face, and she went back down on her knees to pull the girl close. "Oh, my darling, Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. This uncertainty is putting a cloud over my disposition." "It's forgiven, Mama. What do I need to look for?" Elizabeth asked. "Onions, turnips, some dandelions if you can find them. Anything you can find that might be fit to go into the soup pot." "Aye," Elizabeth said, and ran off to the far end of their field. The woman walked to the edge of the field, which looked like it had been divided into plots, just like the little garden his mother had in the home he grew up in. He stood there watching her, realizing he must be dreaming because it felt like he was thrust into an old movie, but none of the characters knew he was there. Gingerly, he stepped even closer to see what the woman was doing. She kneeled down, pulling potatoes, very small potatoes, from the ground, then cutting them open with a knife. Each one she found she cut and examined for black spots. The majority of the ones she cut were black inside. These she tossed aside. She did this nonstop until Elizabeth came running up to her. "Mama, Mama, look what I found!" Elizabeth yelled gleefully and skidded into her mother, nearly knocking her over. A tiny cabbage clutched in her hand. "Oh, what's this? This is a nice cabbage, isn't it, my wee angel?" the woman said. "Aye, that it is," Elizabeth laughed. "Look what else I found," she said, pulling 2 small onions and a turnip out of her dress pocket. "This is wonderful, my dear Lizzie. The potatoes have all been taken over by the blight. Let's check on Thomas and see what else we can find." Tyler followed the woman to the other side of the yard. The blight? Is she referring to the potato famine? Why would I dream about the potato famine? This cottage, my cottage, did it exist during the famine? He said to himself. Tyler had read about the Irish potato famine in his European Studies program at college. He watched as they caught up with the little boy, who had his shirt pulled out and stuffed full of various plants, sticks, and maybe even a rock. "What do we have here, Tommy?" the woman asked him. The little boy dropped everything he had found into a pile on the ground and beamed at his mother. The woman poked through the leaves, grass, and sticks. She found some dandelion greens, a branch of raspberries, and a couple of good-sized carrots. "Where did you find these beautiful carrots?" "Over 'ere, Mama." Thomas took off running toward where he had found the carrots. Once the woman and girl caught up with them, they were delighted to find a few more carrots that had not been taken over by the disease that was killing the vegetation in Ireland. With her apron stuffed with food, the woman called to the children to follow her into the house so that she could feed them breakfast. The children scampered behind her. The woman nearly walked right into Tyler, and he noticed that he felt cold, and there was definitely a strong scent of lavender and honeysuckle. Tyler followed them into the cottage, assuring himself that they wouldn't know that he was there. The inside of the cottage was just as it was in his last dream. A fire of peat and dried wood burned on the hearth in the kitchen, even though it was early summer. The woman went into the kitchen and set their bounty on one side of the table. She unwrapped a small loaf of bread that was tied up in a bowl. She sliced off 2 slabs and buttered them. Her buttery supply was going down quicker than she'd anticipated. Hopefully, she would be able to get more from the church before she ran out. It was so nice of the members who still had cows to share their butter with the rest of the congregation. She slid the berries off the stick and tossed the stick into the fire. She poured water from a bucket into a bowl and washed the berries. She plucked them off one by one and laid them on a clean towel. Elizabeth took the bowl of water outside and tossed it into the plants, bringing the bowl back inside to her mother. She took the bowl and rinsed it in another bucket of water and dried it with a towel, then smashed the berries with a pinch of sugar and spread it onto the thick slices of bread and placed them onto the plates, which Elizabeth took to the table. Elizabeth then took 2 tin cups off the shelf and poured milk into them and brought them to the table. The woman called Thomas into the kitchen to eat his breakfast. When they left for America, the church would have so much more food to give out to those who remained. "Are you not eating with us, Mama?" Elizabeth asked. "Oh, I'll eat when you have gone down for your nap. I want to get these vegetables cleaned and taken care of so that we can have good soup for supper." Somehow Tyler knew this wasn't going to be the case. He had a feeling that she wasn't going to be eating anything at all. He knew this because he knew his mother would go without eating to make sure her children were fed, and this mother looked like she would do the same thing. Tyler tossed and turned in his sleep, causing him to wake up. He got up and used the bathroom and got himself a glass of water. It was 1 a.m. He heated up a cup of coffee and decided to work for a couple hours and then go back to sleep. His dream didn't bother him so much as confuse him. Sometime tomorrow he would go to town and see what he could find out about the cottage and the people who had lived here. While he waited for his coffee, he clicked to his computer's search engine and typed in "potato famine." While the results came up, he grabbed his coffee and splashed some creamer into it. Sitting at the coffee table, he scrolled through articles and historical reports. He learned about the time called the Troubles, the Blight, which caused over 1 million people to starve to death, and why at least 1.5 million tried to flee the island. Did Elizabeth, Thomas, and their mother die during the famine? He asked himself. He tried to do a search with their names, but came up with nothing meaningful. He gave up trying to find anything else about the cottage for the night and opened the Word document with his book in it. He wrote for another 2 hours and shut down the computer, curled back up on the sofa under the blanket, and tried to go back to sleep. He slept for a few hours and woke up refreshed. He decided to give the shower a shot, lathering himself up. He briefly thought about getting a tattoo, brushed his teeth, and washed his hair. Once he was done, he got out and wiped the steam off the mirror. He looked at himself checked for pimples, then noticed the shadows under his eyes. He decided he needed a shave, hoping that a clean face would make him look less sickly. Tyler was just splashing on aftershave, something he had picked up from his dad, when he glanced up to see the reflection of a smiling, red-headed woman, the one from his dream. Jumping back and hitting his hip hard on the hot radiator, he swore under his breath and looked back at the mirror. The only eyes looking at him were his own ice-blue ones. He stared at the mirror, hoping that the woman from his dreams would come back, but instead he noticed just how drained and pale he looked. Tyler absent-mindedly rubbed his hip as he walked to the kitchen to brew another pot of coffee. He planned to go into town today to find out what he could about this cottage and the people who had lived here before. After hearing from a couple of people that the place was haunted and having those dreams, as well as a couple of weird things happening, his interest was piqued. Chances were it was nothing more than being overtired, overwrought, and having a very active imagination that was causing him to read more into things than were actually there. Tyler threw on some jeans and a shirt while the coffee brewed. He combed his hair, scowled at the brownish-red roots, and decided the hell with doctor's orders. He was going to dye it back to being blonde, but then thought better of it. If he got his book done in the next 2 weeks, he couldn't risk having hair dye staining his scalp, especially where they were going to cut into his head. He went into his bag and pulled out the box of cleaning supplies for body piercings and opened it on the counter. He needed to clean the nose ring he had been wearing, so he set about doing that. Popping it out, he washed it with soap and water before plopping it into the disinfectant solution he kept handy. From the case, he chose another slimmer and simpler ring and fastened it on. Yeah, he liked this one. It was barely noticeable, but he knew it was there. He wasn't too sure how the locals would perceive some bleach blonde foreigner with a nose ring, but he really needed to get information from the townsfolk. Women usually found him interesting, unique, artsy, and a little bit emo. Girls went nuts for the way he looked, but he wasn't on the prowl for girls. He was on an investigation to get information so that he could stop thinking about what was going on at the cottage and get on with writing his book, or at least give himself peace of mind that he wasn't going crazy. He poured himself a cup of coffee, and while he sipped it, he checked to see if the fridge was working. He had plugged it in when he arrived, as it was empty, dark, and off. Now the light went on, and the fridge was nice and cold inside and just needed a good cleaning. He took out the shelves and put them in the sink. He ran water over them until it got hot. He put the stopper in so that he could leave the shelves soaking in hot soapy water while he was out. That should get the worst of the dust and grime off. Pouring himself a second cup of coffee, he thought about what he would need to get while he was out. Taking his coffee with him, he sat at the kitchen table and pulled a notebook towards him. Taking a full gulp of his coffee, Tyler clicked the pen and began to write. He wrote down what he did know. Thomas, Elizabeth, lived in the cottage. And then what he thought he knew. Blight, potato famine, the cottage. Admittedly, he didn't know much, and for all he knew, it would be a combination of his brain tumor, his imagination, and the stress of it all. Torn between asking questions with the little information he had, risking making an ass of himself, or not knowing, he was more than willing to make an ass of himself. He had done that same thing before on more than one occasion in the name of research. He finished writing the list of things he needed and then stood up. He wanted another cup of coffee, but he would wait until he got into town and had it with his breakfast. Because of his unique looks, waitresses and store clerks usually liked to chat him up, so he was hoping he would run into one who would give him more information about the cottage than he was able to find on the internet. He drained the dregs of coffee from his cup and rinsed it out with water. Turning off the coffee pot, he realized that it didn't have an automatic shut-off. If that were the case, why didn't he remember turning it off last night? Tyler locked up the cottage and headed into town. It was quite a walk, but he really didn't want to drive, and the weather was sunny and warm. He grabbed a light jacket out of his car and headed down the path. He should really think of renting a bike or something while he was here.
Resting bitch face is a temporary fix. Number 1. People who are going to talk your ear off are not going to talk your ear off. They leave you the fuck alone. Yeah. If they don't leave you the fuck alone, they're crazy and you don't want to talk to them anyway. No sane person is going to walk up to this in a store, let's say Walmart, and chat you up. So the overall benefit with that, you know, for one, they leave you the hell alone. You don't have to talk to idiots. And let's face it, people are idiots. And number 2, you're more likely to get in and out of that store quickly. Which brings me to the second reason why RBF is a benefit. People don't cut in front of you in line. No, they're not going to take that on. They do not ask if you mind if they go first because they only have one item. No, that does not happen. They also tend to respond quickly because it looks as though it wouldn't take a whole lot to set your trigger. Yeah. Those little brats that won't shut up, carrying on and giving their parents a hard time. Yeah, you make eye contact in 2 seconds, that comes to a screeching halt. Yeah, that's an on-off switch if I ever saw one. You just shoot that little shithead a look and, yeah, all of a sudden, they are quiet and shy. Coworkers don't tend to ask for you to help them with things. Yeah, you don't get a lot of people trying to push their work off on you. You tend to have the seat next to you open in crowded places like public transportation or waiting rooms. Yeah. Right. You're allowed your personal space. People don't tend to try and, invade that 3-foot area. In fact, you tend to get like a good 6-foot radius around you when you're in public places. Yeah, that's a benefit of resting bitch face. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, everybody wants to take you to Disney World because it's going to be a smooth ride. People don't tend to ask you to lend them money. Water their plants, watch their dog, take in the mail. You do not get asked to do people favors. You are not driving anybody to the airport. Door-to-door solicitors? Yeah, I think they must give off some sort of scent that, when you've scared the shit out of them the first time you open that door, there must be a community that they warn each other to just get the hell away from your house, because it doesn't go on for long. 1 or 2 of them, and you don't have to worry about that doorbell ringing for no reason anymore. Yeah, you don't have to worry about hugging coworkers if you took a week vacation. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Again, it is a temporary solution, having the resting bitch face, because as those of you who, like me, have RBF, once people get to know you and realize that it's just a face, it's not what's on the inside. Yeah. All deals are off. You're driving somebody to fucking airport. You are. Yeah. But the key is to hang on to the benefits of RBF as long as you can. One thing that will creep on you, though, is those people who realize that it is just a condition and not a demeanor, they're going to use you to be their bully. Yeah, shit goes wrong in their life, they're calling you to take care of it. Yeah. Yep. Somebody cuts in line and they're gonna do this, expecting you to take care of it. It's kind of an ego trip for sure. Yeah, knowing that you don't even have to say a word and problem solved. Anyway, RBF has its benefits. Thanks for watching.
Bye.